Shalom, everyone. If you're listening at home, we are in Ruth. We're in the first chapter. Um, Tradition has it that Rut was written as a was written by um, Samuel Samuel as a kind of a prelude or a prologue to the books that bear his name. Okay, and it tells a backstory and a history of the Davidic line prior to David. But it also tells us a lot of other things. It's 4 chapters. We'll be done with it in a month. But when I prayed about doing a lengthy teaching on leadership, Jewish leadership, biblical leadership, I was going to do the books of Shemuel, but then I had it laid on my heart that I should do the prologue also. And then the more I prayed about it, the more I realized that because of the opening passage and what it tells us in Rut, that the that I needed to go back and teach through the book of Judges. So we're through Judges, through Shoftim, and we begin. And Rut says, back in the days when the judges were judging, at a time when there was a famine in the land. Right there, we know a general time period, because we know it was only a few hundred years that the judges reigned in Israel. I tried to pinpoint the exact date of famine. I couldn't find a reference to it in the book of Shoftim. So when we get to the end of Ruth, there is a reference to genealogy that I think will give us a rough estimate of when this part of our history actually took place. Okay, but we are in the time of the judges, the Shoftim. A certain man from Bethlehem went to live in the territory of Moab. He, his wife, and his 2 sons. The man's name was Elimelech, or Elimelech. His wife's name was Naomi, and his 2 sons were named Machlon and Kilion. They were Ephraim from Beit-Lemech in Yehudah. So from that passage, we know not just that it was in the time of the Shoftim, we know that this family was Yehudim. We know that they were from the region of Ephrata, as in the prophecy that the Mashiach would come out of Ephrata. Okay, and they were of the village of Beit-Lechem, also known as Bethlehem. Okay, so if you're reading a standard English, King James or anything like that, it will probably tell you that it was Bethlehem. Not looking for any answers here, but especially to the children over here, can anybody think of a reason why them being from Bethlehem, Ephrathah, might be important? Raise your hand. Okay. So the husband's name was Elimelech or Elimelech, which means my God is king. Okay. His wife's name was Naomi, which means pleasant, and they were from what would later be known as the city of David. They arrived in the plain of Moab and settled there. Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left, she and her two sons. You know, it's interesting that it's the book of Ruth, and we focus so much on what changed in her. But as I was reading through this morning, it dawned on me, and I've never really looked at this before. It's really not her story. It's really Naomi's story and the change that happened in her. And so we're going to learn important things about our Jewish history through the life of Ruth. But it was Naomi that we actually see the great change in. Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left, she and her two sons. They took wives for themselves from the women of Moab. The name of the one was Orpah, and the name of the other was Ruth. They lived there for about 10 years. Then Mahlon and Kilion died, both of them, and the woman, meaning Naomi, was left with neither her two sons nor her husband. So, start to see why I say it's not really Ruth's story. Okay? It wasn't that Ruth and Orpah were left without husbands. The author says that Shmuel says that Naomi was left without her husband and her sons. And the question then becomes why is it written from that perspective? I think it's probably because Naomi at this point is she's the only Yitzraelim still left present. Her husband has died, her sons have died, her daughters-in-law are there. They are not Yitzraelim, and they cannot be. Okay. Now, had they had sons with their husbands, they would have been counted as Israelim. They could not be Yahudi, or they could be. They could become Yahudi. Okay, and to some degree, they had to cross over if this was a proper marriage. They had to at least live under the aspect of the Torah law that would have applied in the household. Okay. Um, when they married these two sons of Elimelech and Naomi. But we're going to see a picture of true conversion in this story, and we're also going to see a picture of what Ray Comfort calls the true false convert. Okay, the one who takes the first steps, says the right words, but then does not follow through. So she prepared to return with her daughters-in-law from the plain of Moab, for in the plain of Moab she had heard how Yehovah had paid attention to his people by giving them food. Interesting how we were just reading in Bashiri earlier, and food in a time of famine was a picture of salvation. Okay, so here's a carryover. This happens much later in the history of our people, but we see that Israel now is the place where the famine has ended and the food is available. It says, she left the place where she was with her two daughters-in-law and took the road leading back to Yehudah. Okay, so we see the picture of the believer, the Yitzraeli, on the path home and 2 converts following her on her way back to Jerusalem, or to, well, not really Jerusalem, back to Israel. Israel. Okay? And so they're making the journey. And this is very comparative to when we lead someone to faith. Okay? And we all have had, well, the adults here at least, have had people say, I see the beauty of your faith. I see the beauty of your traditions. I want to be Jewish. And they start to make steps toward it. And we find it heartbreaking. I know I've gone through it 100 times easily when people say, oh, but that part of it isn't for me. Or, oh, my family doesn't understand the decision that I've made. Or I can't let go of certain things. I had a guy tell me this week who's been talking to me since April. His brother is Messianic. They have actual, like, they're like most of us here. They have actual bloodline in Yehudah and in Israelim. And he's been talking to me and talking to me and talking to me and asking me questions. And finally, he came to me yesterday and he said what I've known for a while, but I was waiting for him to say. He said, I cannot give up my bacon, my pork. I cannot give up my shrimp. I cannot give. And he made this list. And he said, I'm sorry. And I said, don't tell me you're sorry. I'm not the one who told you to give it up. Naomi and her 2 daughters-in-law, or said to her 2 daughters-in-law, each of you go back to your mother's house. May Yehovah show grace to you as you did to those who died and to me. In other words, you've been good to me, you've been good to my sons, but I'm releasing you from any obligation. And I think there's a picture here of how we're supposed to treat new converts or professing new converts or people who are in the process. Okay, I think we have this churchianity idea that we've inherited that have come down in the form of lies that we've inherited from our fathers. You know, I mean, there's the passage in the Tanakh that talks about in the last days, 10 men from every nation will come alongside of a Jew and take hold of his zitiot and say, you know, teach us the ways of Elohim. We've inherited only lies from our fathers, and I think that's where kind of what it is when we get this idea from the church that says, if somebody shows an interest, follow them, harp at them, lecture them, berate them, beat it into their heads how they're supposed to live. And sadly, what most of those churches are teaching isn't even what Torah says about how we're supposed to live. However, we inherited that. Those of us who came out of the church and re-embraced our heritage, we tend to fall into the trap of doing the same thing. But I think there's a lesson here in the life of Naomi that she had a maturity above and beyond these professing converts. And she said, you know, it's okay. It's okay. Go back to what you knew if this isn't for you. See, I think we forget, as much as I would love for the whole world to become Jewish, he didn't call the whole world to become Jewish. He called Jews, Yisraelim, he called us to be priests to the nations so that they would have the opportunity. Okay? The Mashiach said, many are called, few are chosen. Okay? We got this idea from the church that everybody's chosen. He didn't die so that everyone could be set apart. He died so that everyone would have the opportunity to be set apart. Okay, and the scripture says that to those who believe, he gave the power to become the sons of Elohim. He did not say everyone who hears the word has to become a son of Elohim. He said, or she said, may Yehovah grant you security in the home of a new husband. Then she kissed them, but they began weeping aloud. You see that? She's telling them it's okay to not be Jewish. If you weren't born Yisrael or Yisraelim, and this is not in your heart, don't fake it. And she kissed them and blessed them. Where have we lost that? At what point did we come to the and I'm as guilty as anybody. At what point did we start becoming so frustrated with people who didn't get it as to stop showing them love? We all need to take a lesson from Naomi. They said to her, no, we want to return with you to your people. Naomi said, go back, my daughters. Why do you want to go with me? Do I still have sons in my womb who could become your husbands? Go back, my daughters, go your way, for I'm too old to have a husband. Even if I were to say, I still have hope, even if I had a husband tonight and bore sons, would you wait for them until they grew up? Would you refuse to marry just for them? She says, that's the Torah law, that the brother would perform the duty of the husband. But even if, that's not possible. Okay, you've not it, and so if this is not for you, if you're not just going to be a Jew just to be a Jew, then go back. I'm starting to understand why in Orthodox Judaism, if you go to them and say you want to convert, they deny you the first two times. If you don't come back a third time and ask again, they won't even start the process of you being a proselyte. No, my daughters, on your behalf, I feel very bitter that the hand of Yehovah has gone out against me. Do you notice she doesn't say, I feel bitter that things didn't work out for me? She says, I feel bitter that because things didn't work out for me, they also didn't work out for you. Your Jewish journey should have been better than this. She's not lamenting for her, she's lamenting for them. Why don't we have that heart toward people who begin the take the steps and don't follow through? I think if we were to approach things that way, maybe more people would come back and follow through. Maybe if they didn't feel pushed away because they failed the first time, maybe they would come back and try it again. Um, Again, they wept aloud. Then Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye. But Ruth stuck with her. You notice how many times there she told them, you can go. It's okay. Just go back home. You don't have to make this journey with me. This is my journey. And one of them said, all right, I'm going home. And the other one said, nope, I'm sticking by you. I would so much rather have a Ruth in my congregation than a Ruth and an Orpah. Okay? You want to know where congregations get in trouble? How you end up with non-believers or lukewarm believers running things? It's because everybody's after the Orpah. Everybody goes out, just like the church, and wants to include everybody. This faith was not supposed to be all-inclusive. This faith is actually supposed to be exclusionary. We're actually supposed to be the uh, the oddballs, so to speak. Um, we're supposed to be set apart to a degree that no one can look at us and confuse us for the church or for Islam or for Buddhism or anything else. When people look at us, when they see our kippah, our kippot, sorry, when they see our talitnio, when they um, when they see the talio, talim, talim, I get that wrong all the time. Um, when they see those things, and when they see us turn down food that isn't kosher, when they see us resting on the Sabbath, when they see us keeping His days and not other days, no one can then look at us and say, uh, "I think they're into that Shintoism out of Japan." Okay, they know who we belong to. That doesn't happen if we keep the orpas. It only happens if we keep the root. She said, "Look, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her Eloha. Go back after your sister-in-law." How many times do we see that? We see people who are doing really well, having begun their walk, and they run back after the sister-in-law, meaning they run back after their family. Okay, that sister-in-law was a sister-in-law through marriage, but she was actually more closely related to than to Ruth, being a Moabite. She would have been more closely related to Ruth than Ruth was to Naomi. But Ruth said, "Don't press me to leave you and stop following you." This is beautiful. This is one of my favorite passages in all of Scripture because this is the heart of a true convert. I love this passage so much. Lisa used it was a different translation. I think it's out of the New King James, but Lisa actually quoted a translation of this, and I did a variant because it didn't quite fit the husband's role. But for marriage vows, this is what we use. Okay, in part because a wife's relationship to her husband is supposed to be an exact picture of the relationship that we want to have with Yehovah. It says, "Don't press me to leave you or stop following you, for wherever you go, I will go, and wherever you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your Elohim will be my Elohim. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May Yehovah bring terrible curses on me, and worse ones as well, if anything but death separates you from me." That, I think, is what we're looking for a convert to say with full intention, with adamancy, with fervency, not just, "Hey, I'm really enjoying keeping the Sabbath with you this week. I think this is pretty cool. Yeah, I'm going to think about those food laws. I want to be one of you." I think if the convert can't stand in front of us and honestly say, "Don't press me to leave you and stop following you," because what are we supposed to be? Priests to the nations, right? So if they, as the Talmud, can't say to the Rabbim, "Don't press me to stop anymore, to stop following after you," which implies that we have given them the suggestion. Wherever you go, I will go, and wherever you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your Elohim will be my Elohim. Okay, if they can't say that and mean it, they're probably not ready to make the choice. And I think we've again, that churchianity thing. We got into the idea, just said, come down to the altar and say the prayer, and then you know what, everything else come down the road, and you'll figure it out, and we'll have 100 different discipleship classes and what have you. If they don't know what they're getting into, how can we expect them to maintain it? When Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more to her. Okay, I think there's a lesson there. Okay, we need to make sure they know what they're getting into. Let them know, if this isn't for you, we get that. No harm, no foul, no hard feelings, but make sure you're for real. And then when we see absolutely that the person is determined to go with us, to follow Elohim, then that needs to be that. We need to say, okay, come with us. So the two of them went on until they came to Bethlehem. When they arrived in Bethlehem, the whole city was stirred with excitement over them. I think that's the another flaw. I shouldn't say the other. There's so many of them. Another flaw in the church is you'll have someone who makes a profession and nothing changes, and the congregation just flocks to them and treats them like they're something special. And then you'll have somebody over here who maybe isn't as vocal about it, but is actually changing their ways. And the congregation, because that person is not a social butterfly, ignores them, treats them like an outsider. When someone truly makes the decision to become Jewish, when that is in their heart and they fervently mean it, our city, our congregation in this area needs to be stirred with excitement over them. The woman asked, the women asked, "Can this be Naomi? Don't call me Naomi," she answered them. "Call me Mara." Naomi, I told you earlier, means pleasant, and Mara means bitter. Because Shaddai has made my life very bitter. Remember what Shaddai means. Shaddai is a picture of being drawn to a mother's breast, to be nurtured, to be nourished, and to be protected. So she's saying the one who's supposed to nurture me and nourish me and protect me has made me bitter. I went out full, and Yehovah has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? Yehovah has testified against me. Shaddai has afflicted me. This is how Naomi returned with Ruth, the woman from Moab, her daughter-in-law, accompanying her from the plain of Moab. They arrived in Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. Mashiach said that the harvest is waiting. The fields are ready. But if we try to harvest at the wrong time, if we try to insist that someone, because they've said a few right things, is a part of the flock, when they're clearly not, then we've plucked that head of grain before it was ripe. But if we see the ripe head of grain and we don't pluck it and we let it become overripe, that's also a foul, bitter taste. And then we've missed the opportunity to bring into the fold someone who would have genuinely loved living as a Jew.